Hey, this is Daniel Rosenboom, and you're listening to The Other Side of the Bell.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to everything trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We'll help you take your trumpet playing to the next level. I'm John Snell, trumpet specialist here at Bob Reeves Brass, and I'll be your host for this episode. My special guest today is Bill Bing. We'll get to Bill's interview here in a moment after a word from our sponsor and some trumpet news. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. At Bob Reeves Brass, we work closely with you to understand your unique needs and provide tailored solutions like valve alignments, custom-fit mouthpieces from our extensive stock models or a hand-carved custom mouthpiece, gap adjustments with the Reeves sleeve system, or even tweaking your existing gear. No matter your level of experience, we offer free consultations and serve musicians from all walks of life. And if you're looking for the perfect instrument to inspire your next musical masterpiece, we proudly carry the exquisite Van Laar line of trumpets and flugelhorns, as well as the superb Charlie Davis line of trumpets. What's more, Bob Reeves Brass is taking their commitment to your musical journey even further. We're now offering a carefully curated collection of top-notch products designed specifically for brass musicians. You'll find premium guard bags to protect your beloved instruments, a diverse range of mutes from renowned brands like Ulvain mutes, Yupon and Okura mutes from Japan, Trumcore mutes, Rayano, Clary Wood mutes, and Charlie Davis mutes, ensuring you have the perfect mute for every performance. But that's not all. We've also got you covered when it comes to essential maintenance supplies, with a hand-picked selection of valve oils, lubricants, and more to keep your instruments in tip-top shape. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. Well, if you haven't heard, Bob Reeves Brass is doing a pop-up shop at Virtuosity Musical Instruments in Boston, Massachusetts. The dates for that are October 6th and 7th, Friday and Saturday. I will be there to do mouthpiece consultations and valve alignments on the spot. So if you're in the New England area and can swing by Virtuosity, they have a wonderful shop there. Steve Johnson is a great friend and actually recently had me on his podcast with Josh Landris, the Long Tones. But it's going to be a great hang, a great time. Spots are limited because it's just going to be me this time, and there's only so much I can do in a day. Although I can do a lot. I think at the Bill Adam Trumpet Festival, I did 30-something alignments by myself. However, we are limited by their hours and, of course, my fingers and how fast they can work. So we will have the links in the description of this podcast and on the show notes for this page at bobreeves.com. And you can also find information on Facebook. Just look under the Virtuosity or under Bob Reeves Brass. We have an event there with all the information. So we will have that link where you can sign up for a consultation or a valve alignment or both. And I hope to see you there if I'm not eating clam chowder at the Union Oyster House or a lobster roll. Anyway, October 6th and 7th, it's going to be a lot of fun. I will see you there. I also want to give a shout out to our previous guest and friend, Chris Bodie, who after several years is releasing a new album entitled Volume 1, which is also exciting because that may mean there's more. But it is on the prestigious Blue Note label, so it's awesome to hear Chris putting out some new material and on such a great label. October 20th, that hits stores officially, although you can pre-order it. And a little bird told me that we will have Chris on again to talk about this, because if you are, and I have a lot of fans of the podcast, and a lot of you have told me that Chris is one of your favorite episodes, Chris Bode's episode. He did talk. We talked about albums, and he said, no, I probably will never do another album because of the time involved and just being off the road. So it's going to be great to follow up with him on that and see how that turned around and why. I mean, obviously, if you have Blue Note knocking on your door, it's hard to turn that down. So anyway, Chris Bode, Volume 1 on the Blue Note label drops October 20th, and keep your eyes and ears out for a follow-up Chris Bode interview. And maybe just hit that subscribe button, and you're not going to have to worry about it. And also, real quickly, I do want to mention we got that huge order of guard bags. Unfortunately, we couldn't get everything, so it's mostly triple bags, but the good news is the triple bags are the most popular that they make. We have a couple wheelies and a couple other things in the mix. All of those are available on our online store, trumpetmouthpiece.com. Get them while they're hot. Our next shipment's not going to come for another few months, so if you're looking for a guard bag, we have both trumpet and trombone that arrive this time. And by all means, if there's something in particular you're looking for, let me know or let us know, info@bobreeves.com or john@bobreeves.com, because we're happy to special order a case for you, or obviously stock the model that you're interested in. And we also got some cool new mutes coming in, some Okura mutes and Yupon mutes from Japan, as well as some new Ulven straight mutes from Sweden. We've been carrying the Ulven mutes for a while. We have the Dizzy Cup, the Dizzy Bop, the Poppy Cup, the Poppy Bop. Woo, that's a mouthful. But they're making some new straight mutes, which are awesome. So we'll have those in pretty soon. Again, all of that is available at bobreeves.com, our main site, and then our online store, trumpetmouthpiece.com, if you want to just go straight to the buying, straight to the shopping. Okay. Now, I'm so excited about today's interview. My former trumpet teacher twice, which I'll tell you a little bit more after the interview. But, the funniest person alive, amazing trumpet player, amazing teacher, and can't wait to have Bill Bing on. So let's get right to my interview with Bill Bing. Well, my special guest today, Bill Bing, got his degree in music education from the University of Michigan and his trumpet performance degree from the University of Southern California. Bill has had a varied career in both performance and education. He was the director of bands for over 50 years at Caltech, starting in 1970. In addition to his work at Caltech, Bill has played and performed with every major performance group here in Los Angeles, including the LA Opera, where he was a member for 10 years, the LA Chamber Orchestra, where he was a member for 5 years, and with performances with the LA Phil, the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra, and many others. Bill also played with the Detroit Symphony and the San Antonio Symphony. Bill has written 3 books, Breathing as Applied to Brass Playing, The Bing Book, and Fundamentals of Brass Playing. Bill has also taught privately at Cal State University Northridge, Cal State LA, Cal State Fullerton, Biola, Occidental, and others. Bill has a popular YouTube channel where he does Bill Bing's Trumpet Talk and is still actively teaching in his private studio. Without further ado, here's my interview with Bill Bing. Well, it's such an honor to have up at the Bob Reeves Brass Podcast studio today, Bill Bing. Bill, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you very much, John. It's a great pleasure to be here. As a matter of fact, at my age, it's a great pleasure to be anywhere.
Well, and, start with gratitude, right? We're glad.
Gratitude. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to beat you to it. What is the one thing you'd like to leave with?
Oh, you can answer
players.
My question. What's your let's go backwards. What's your best piece of advice, Bill?
Don't quit your day job.
Okay. And that's the other side of the bell. Thanks, folks.
It was a good interview, John. I was worried about it.
My best one. So, well, let's rewind and let's start with where you got started.
Well, I got started it's hard for me to be serious, but I'll do.
Well, at least with the trumpet. I
Oh,
mean,
well,
you started a lot of things, like this podcast.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. Yeah. So I got started on trumpet because I don't know why I go into a stand-up routine when I get into a group with trumpet players, but I have the best time. That's one thing I love about music and trumpet playing is it's balm for the soul.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of being with people that love what you do. And in this case, it's even better because we get to talk about me. Because the last time I talked about me, I went to a psychiatrist. This is a true story. And I looked over at the psychiatrist therapist, and he was asleep. And so I'm thinking, well, my problems can't be that bad if I put my therapist to sleep. And that was it. And speaking of psychiatrists, is this story that Roy Popper likes to tell about Jimmy Stamp. And Jimmy Stamp had this student who was, shall we say, he was a devoted student and dedicated to the instrument, but he never got much better over the years. And finally, Jimmy said to him, he says, we got to be honest here. We've been here a while, and I can't. Maybe you notice we're not making a lot of progress. And why do you keep coming back? And the guy says to Jimmy, he says, "Well, it's cheaper than a therapist." So I want to thank both of you guys here today for saving me a trip to the therapist.
Well, there you go. Yeah, let's talk about you. And if we find Preston asleep, you'll know your problems aren't that bad.
Okay.
So, but when was the first time you played the trumpet?
Okay, the first time I played the trumpet was probably in the 8th grade. I got kind of a late start.
Really?
And I started on piano, and that didn't work. And then my parents, both my parents, my whole family's very musical. Mm-hmm. My father was a physician, but he was a superb musician. My mother was a fine musician who would sing in Boulanger's group at the Paris Conservatory. And so they were interested in having all their kids either play something or sing or something. So I ended up, after piano, playing the trumpet, and I was like way behind everybody else. And so for a year, I went to public school, and after that, I was fortunate enough to go to a private school. And but before I went to the private school, I went to National Music Camp in Interlochen, Michigan. And so I went there, and I auditioned, and there were 24 trumpets. And I'm proud to say I wasn't last chair, but I did manage to squeak in on the 21st chair. But you got to remember, these are the people who were at the camp at the same time as I was. There was Mark Gould. Mark Gould ended up principal trumpet, Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, after having a great career as a jazz musician in Boston and other things. And then there was Roger Blackburn, who ended up in the Philadelphia Orchestra. There was first Adele Sanchez, who played first trumpet in the Washington Symphony, the National Symphony. And I hear these guys play. Roger Blackburn plays the Mendez solo like there's no problem. Adele Sanchez plays the Brandenburg on his B flat. And Mark was able to do all that and that much more. So I'm thinking, wow, what can I do? So I focused on finding a girl and getting a girlfriend. And I didn't distinguish myself as a trumpet player, but I did distinguish myself as having one of the first dates. It's not saying much when the trumpet player gets a date, that's kind of noter. That's a note. But I did manage to work my way up to 14th chair. And it was great to have challenges every week. And then I ended up going to the Interlochen Arts Academy, which is a year-round school. And that was just the best thing in the world for me. At my public school, I was not doing well academically, and I was starting to hang out with the bad boys. I know it's hard to believe. But I ended up going to the Arts Academy and having the best time of my life. At the Arts Academy, we had 2 hours of orchestra every day. Wow. And like the first flute ended up being the principal flute in the New York Philharmonic, Gene Baxtresser. The first trumpet player was a fellow named Ralph Hall, who was, when he went to Juilliard, he was first chair, I think, in the orchestra his first or second year. It was that kind of a group. Every week we would have challenges pretty much. And so I ended up, I think, at Interlochen 4th chair and so I got to go on the tours and everything. But it was a great experience for me, such that I had a great trumpet teacher, Ray Lichtenwalter, and then Clifford Lilia, who was the teacher at the University of Michigan. And so after at Interlochen, I decided I had two choices. I was going to go into medicine or music. And I got accepted into two schools, one for pre-med and one for music. And I decided to head towards music because that was something that I really enjoyed so much.
Really?
And I asked Clifford Lilia, who was teaching in Michigan at the time, he would drive out to Interlochen. And I asked him, I said, how am I doing? Do you think I have a shot at this? And he said, well, you already play better than some of the students at the school. And so I thought, well, maybe that means I have a chance. So I ended up going to Michigan. And when I went to audition for the orchestra, I auditioned, and everything they asked me to read, I'd already played in a concert. And so I ended up being second chair in the top orchestra next to Rob Roy McGregor.
Oh, geez.
And Rob was like a mentor to me. I mean, he was somebody that played just beautifully, amazing, great technique, range. And as you know, he ended up in the LA Phil and doing his books, which we can talk about later, how that started. But he also would do things with me, like he played Maurice Andre records. And he'd say, listen to this phrase. And you'd hear Andre make these incredible phrases, which I might not have noticed. So I had the beautiful benefit of Clifford Lilia, who was a real mentor to me, and plus being able to sit next to somebody like Rob. And after my first year, Rob was out and went to West Point, I think, and I ended up being first trumpet in the Michigan Orchestra starting in my sophomore year. And I did that for 3 years, and then I played I played every chair in the jazz band, fourth, third, second, and first. So it was a great kind of learning opportunity for me.
Yeah.
Is it time to take a bathroom break now?
Yeah, if you need to.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm old, I don't know how long. Okay. You can keep all this in, by the way. Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about that. I mean, the decision to go, when you have a choice of med school and music school. I mean, I know there's a lot of young people that listen to this podcast and are going through the same things. I mean, it sounded like, Clifford Lilia gave you some advice in terms of where you were in terms of your chances of success. But, as a teacher yourself now, like, how do you advise someone to, because you're young, can you do the risk of going into a music career and giving it all you can? Or?
Well, there are certain students it's real obvious. They just play great and there's no question. But it just brings to my mind, like one of my students who was at CSUN was John Christensen. And John was a fine player. And I said, what are you going to do? And he says, I want to play with a rock and roll band. And I go, well, good luck. Because how many bands? There are like Guns N' Roses, and played with them.
Yeah.
And, there's, Tower of Power, and there are rock and roll bands. He was really, and so he ended up actually playing with Real Big Fish.
Yeah.
So... at this point, and I had another student who was not particularly good, Kevin Bryan. He studied with me at Occidental College and Kevin was a good student, but not a great student, And we didn't see him for a while, and he gave me a call. And he said he was in town, and he was playing a lead with Tito Puente. And I go, dude, man, you've been practicing? And he says, yeah, I've been practicing. And then about a year or two later, he calls me and said, Bill, I want to let you know I'm playing lead with Duke Ellington. And I go, wow, tell me how you did it, man. Yeah. And he says, Bill, I can't thank you enough. He says, what you did helped me so much. And I said, well, what did I do? Yeah, he said, you told me to go study with Bobby Shue. So I'm thinking a little air was deflated, let's say. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, yeah, good for me,
Yeah.
And it reminds me at CSUN, I think it was a couple of my students, I don't remember, but I'm scared to mention any names because I'm afraid I'll leave some out, But I had some great students at CSUN, and I don't know why, I think it might be Ron Blake and possibly a couple of other students, maybe Forrest, but I don't know. But, they came to me and their chops were better. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm thinking, all right, they're doing your job. This is great. And I said, what's going on? I says, well, I took a couple of lessons with Bobby Shue, And I'm going, okay, I can see the handwriting's on the wall. You can't fight him. You got to join him, right? There's something going on there. And it turns out Bobby was good friends with my brother-in-law. They were in the military together.
Interesting.
And So I took a couple of lessons with Bobby, and it was great. I mean, he's a good analyst, and the funny part, Bobby, I said, "Who'd you study with?" And he says, "I never had a teacher to get in my way." But that's a way of saying I studied with everybody.
Yeah.
When he was on the bands, he picked everybody's brains, and he was smart enough to be able to kind of figure a lot of it out for himself.
Mm-hmm.
But the nicest compliment, one of the nicest compliments I ever got was when I retired from Caltech, or after my 25th year, I asked Bobby to write something, and he says, "To Bill, if I had kids who played the trumpet, I'd hope they'd study with you."
Oh.
So I thought that was,
Yeah.
and so I thought that was really nice.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think about, what was the question?
Well, so we were. I was talking about your decision to go to music school versus medical school, and that's not that it's black and white, but it kind of is in terms of choices and which ways to go in your career, and I've just what more insight into what your decision was, and then how you guide your students when they're in that crossroads.
Well, to tell the truth, I kind of have an approach which, as I said, you've got some students that are right out of the, Javier Gonzalez is one that comes to mind. When he started with me in high school, he played a few notes, and I was outside, and my wife says, "I think you're going to like this one." And from the get-go, he practiced a lot. And so it was pretty clear he was going to be a trumpet player, and I've had other students like that. But I often tell students, I said, whatever you do, don't go into music. Just for God's sake, there's lots of easier ways to make a living. But I know, as it was in my case, that was the only thing I could do. I loved music, and I could sit in front of a trumpet piece and practice for a couple of hours without batting an eyelash. Whereas you put a chemistry book in front of me, and all of a sudden, white noise. Shh. So I'm thinking, well, this is pretty clear. Yeah. So when I tell a student that, I know in the back of my mind that if you really want to do it more than anything, then go for it. Because that's the kind of attitude you're going to need in order to succeed.
Yeah.
If you take a half-assed approach to it, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So those students that I'm very proud of, all the students that I've worked with, that they've either gone into playing or teaching or gone into some other field or become teachers themselves, teaching junior high school. And that's really the name of the game, is to end up doing something you really enjoy.
Yeah.
And if music is it, then I say go for it.
Yeah, great advice. So let's jump back in. So you were playing with Rob Roy in Michigan at the university. Did you go on to graduate work, or did you jump into the workforce?
Well, what happened was I went to Michigan, and Gatala came out with the orchestra, his BSO, and my teacher, Mr. Lilia, had a few people play for him, and I was one of the lucky ones. So I got to play for him, and it was shortly after that I graduated from college. But prior to that, I'd already done some playing with the Detroit Symphony because I had studied with Frank Katarabic, who was principal at the time. So I played some with them, and they needed extra players. But when I was with Gatala, I played for Gatala, and then about after I graduated, about 2 months later, and that was when the Vietnam War was cooking. And so I'm thinking, wow, I'm bad enough with the trumpet. I don't know what I'd be carrying any kind of mortar weapon. I could shoot myself in the foot. But God bless, I have 2 foster kids who are in the military now, and I thank them all their time for their service, because that's pretty serious. But I didn't shirk the military. I think the best thing I can do in the military is play my trumpet. So I went on and auditioned for the Air Force Band in Washington, and I auditioned for the West Point Band, and I got into both of those groups. And I'm thinking, that's great. I think I can serve my country best playing my trumpet. So I went to take my physical, and I flunked my physical because I have migraine headaches, and I had to take pills for migraine headaches. And I tried to go in. When they told me you couldn't go in, I said, but you have to let me go in. I quit smoking. I've been running 3 miles every day. I had a going-away party last night. I'm going to play the Air Force Band in Washington.
Yeah.
And the recruiter said, kid, if you give me any more, I'll just send you over to the Marines, And so that was the end of the military career. But what it did do was send me off to Boston. I called Gatala up and I said, any chance you can take me as a student? He says, I only take 5 students and I've got 5 students, but you sound like somebody who could use some help. So he was kind enough to take me on as a student at Boston University, where I studied with him for a year.
So what was that like?
Studying with Gatala was a good joy. He did more to change my sound than I think just about anybody. His whole thing was about sound. He worked me really hard on transposition and the technique, and I got to work with Roger Voisin a little bit as well on things like the Poulenc Trio, and which was great because he had worked with Poulenc on it. So I had some great opportunities and experiences out in Boston, but I visited my folks who had just moved out to California, and I visited them and I said, wow, this is where this is beautiful. Boston was cold. And I went out to LA and it was beautiful. And so I transferred to USC, not knowing that Jimmy Stamp was the teacher there. And so it worked out really well when I went out to USC. I ended up studying with Jimmy.
Wow. So did you know anything about Jimmy at the time?
Not a thing.
Wow.
Not a thing. And as famous as he is now, you can go all over the world. And I've been to Prague and listened to somebody warm up, and French horn players working on stamp exercises. But at the time, he was just kind of getting the international recognition that Tom Stevens, helped to amplify his signal, so to speak. And so he said to me, he says, I interviewed him, and he said that, it's really wonderful the way people all over seem to be getting help with my exercises, He was a very humble person about it. He was just very nice.
Wow. So let's talk about your experience with Jimmy. What do you remember your first lesson with him? Or
Well, it's interesting with Jimmy because most everybody else who studied with Jimmy, he would start with his buzzing exercises, right? But with me, we played. I think a lot of the reason had to do with this because when I worked with Clifford Lilia, we really worked on getting into the center of the sound. And when you're in the center of the sound playing, it's much easier to do anything on the instrument. And so I think at that point, I was doing a lot of what his exercises accomplished, and that's getting you to play in the center of the sound. And I think Jimmy was intuitive. As much as any teacher, he sort of knew what I needed to do, and that was to play my trumpet. And eventually he introduced me to his buzzing system, and he introduced me to his exercises. But he didn't jump into it. Maybe he thought I needed a period of adjustment before I would jump into his exercises. And so that was my experience with Jimmy, plus meeting all the great players that would hang out at his place. But at the same time, when I first came to town, I studied with John Kleiman because I met Jack Cohen at Calicchio's, and I said, Jack, I didn't know Jack, but I said, I'm just new in town. What should I do? And he said, John Kleiman sounds like it'd be a good fit. So that was my first teacher out in L.A.
Really? What was that like? Because Bob Reeves, that's the reason why the shop exists, is because of John Kleiman.
Right?
Yeah. So what were your lessons like with John?
John was great. He was very serious. The first thing he does is, you got to listen to Harry Glantz. So he put on a recording of Harry Glantz. This is what you want to sound like. And he could be rough. I know he could be really tough. I've seen some students come out of the studio not looking too good, too happy. But I think if you were serious and you practiced a lot, he knew that, and he would help you any way he possibly could.
Yeah. So you stayed with John a little bit, then you got with Jimmy, and then did you start freelancing in LA at that point, or?
A little bit. I was still a student at SC, but I got into debut orchestra. I got into the American Youth Symphony Orchestra, so my name got kicked around a little bit. But I wasn't, and I also played a lot of clubs, even in college. I played up weekends almost every weekend with some dance band or something like that, and had students to make money. So when I came to LA, I started getting around a bit. And then before I even graduated, I auditioned for the San Antonio Symphony, and I got that job. And so I went to San Antonio, and the trumpet section in the San Antonio Symphony that year was Tony Plogue was on first trumpet, and Glenn Fischel, the principal in San Francisco, was on third trumpet. So I was in second. It was we just switched around a lot. But playing with that section to start off with was really wonderful. And speaking of Bob Reeves,
Yeah.
Glenn Fischel, when he came to my house to audition for the Israel Philharmonic, he stayed in my house, and I never heard him practice. But every day he'd go to Bob Reeves, and he'd play and try out different mouthpieces. I said, "Aren't you going to practice?" He says, "I just played for 4 hours at Bob Reeves." And he got the job.
Yeah.
And he was one of the most natural players I've ever heard.
Yeah, great player.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should interview him at some point here because he's,
Right.
wealth of information.
Right.
But what a section in San Antonio,
Right.
a little hotbed of
Yeah, who would have guessed?
orchestral
But
trumpet
by 2
players.
years later, we were all gone.
Yeah.
Tony had left to become a soloist and
Mhm.
played principal in the LA Chamber Orchestra. Glenn Fischel went on to his career. And I came back to LA because I wasn't really enjoying playing in the orchestra, even though I had some good experiences.
Mhm.
So I decided, and I came back to LA. I had married my wonderful wife, Dolores, and great cello player and musician. And so we came back to make a go of it. We had not much money. We had very little money. And so I would do things like I would take a job teaching at a music store. I'd drive from my house in Pasadena out to Northridge and make maybe $15, $20 every time I went out there. But I was doing something, and so I was trying to do whatever I could do. But at that same time, I started to have a meltdown in my chops. I was big fish at SC, and I was a pretty big fish at San Antonio. And I came back to LA. I think I had one job in 6 months. And so accordingly, my mental attitude was not great, and my chops were sinking faster than that. And so I was kind of hurting, and but I kept practicing. I didn't know what else to do, even though I wasn't happy at all with what was happening. I kept practicing. And one day I got a call to play the first trumpet on the B minor Mass with the SC orchestra. And I thought, well, I can't play, but this is it. This is their do or die moment here. So I took the job, and at the first rehearsal, I played a lot better than I thought I was capable of doing. And I realized what a mental game this process is. It's not always mental, right? There are times, of course, when chops have to be analyzed and looked at. But for me at that point, it was my mental approach towards the instrument. And I realized at that point, after being able to play this Bach, I wouldn't say it was a stellar performance. It's not like going and hearing Rob McGregor or Dave Washburn or Tony Plogue or any of these people who were so great at that.
Yeah.
I came to the conclusion what a mental game this is. And since then, I've had no kinds of mental issues. I just realized that, that it really is about focus. And so, I've had times when I didn't play as well as I would like. Of course, we can do a whole podcast on my mistakes, but by and large, it's been something that it's been pretty predictable when I pick up the trumpet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I appreciate your openness about talking about what it's like as a freelance musician sometimes,
Right.
and the mental aspect of it. Because, it's those things we don't learn in music school. That,
Right.
you learn how to keep your chops up and stuff. But if the
Right.
phone's not ringing,
Right.
especially if you've, playing in the symphony or you've achieved certain things, and then
Right.
now there's a dry spell, there's the mental aspect of that you have
Right.
to get through. And that's, so I appreciate you sharing that and the fact that you
Yeah.
recognize that in yourself
Right.
and realize that you have to deal with
And
it.
another thing I did at the time was I had a friend named Bill Hicks, who was a very good, strong lead player, went to CSUN, I think. And he ended up, he was a Claude Gordon student. And so he said, "Why don't you see Claude?" And I thought, well, okay, he's got a lot of good students. So I went to study with Claude. And Claude was a no-nonsense guy, whereas Jimmy was just like a breath of fresh air. Claude was like a hot wind blowing in from the desert, and
Yeah.
but he cleared any ambiguity out of my mind to the extent that he said, "There's only one way to play the trumpet, and that's the way I'm going to show you how to play." And he talks about the 7 things that you do in order to play the trumpet. And I just said, "Okay, I'm going to shut up and listen to this guy and see what I can get out of it." And I worked for him over a year, and it was really helpful because, boy, he gave me a set routine that I practiced every day. It wasn't like I could say, well, maybe this will be good, maybe this will be good. No, you just work really hard to get all that accomplished. So, and to that extent, it was very helpful. It showed me how to organize a lesson plan and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. So he kind of
Yeah, and so many people think that, well, Jimmy Stamp and Claude Gordon are not compatible.
Yeah.
You'll find people that say, well, this system isn't compatible with this system. And that goes on a lot, unfortunately. But I found that you can get something from all of these incredible teachers and systems. Bill Adams, look at all the amazing students that he's had, right? And you've got Jimmy Stamp, you've got Claude Gordon, and now there's a whole new generation of teachers and players that are coming up with, like Dan Rosenblum with his book and things like that. And Javier's got some great exercises. So there's new concepts being formed all the time.
Yeah.
So they can all be integrated. That's sort of my take on so much of what playing is about to begin with. You can integrate the systems, and you can integrate the performances and the cultures, and it makes for a much richer environment all the way around.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems obvious, but the fact that we're all different, and something that one teacher says and something another teacher says might all of a sudden click with us, a student, and that's But people are people, and I think social media and the internet has certainly exacerbated some of those issues.
Unfortunately,
but you realize, look, all of these teachers have created great students, and so there must be something there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the takeaways, like in studying with you. I always, even from a young age, I remember you were always bringing in these ideas from different teachers,
That's nice.
and my young brain didn't connect the dots at first, but then I realized,
Yeah, we had a good time together.
Oh yeah, we had lots of fun.
Really good. You were always a good player and a great student. And
where do I send the check?
No check. Just know that this great thing about teaching is that it gives you a chance to absorb not only what the student brings to the table, but to reflect on what you think works for yourself and as the trumpet community. When I retired, one of the hard things about being retired is trying to stay relevant. And people who retire, I think this is a general issue, is I did this for so long and it was so intense, and I think that's what I miss so much, is getting the chance to work with young people. And I remember the day you were in my studio and I get a call from Bob Reeves. You remember that? Yeah. And Bob calls me and he says, I need someone to help out at the shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, I think you were there. I said, I think.
No, because that was just because I remember I got a call.
Yeah.
I was doing computer stuff.
Right.
And I got a call. I was on my lunch break.
Okay.
And which is a whole other story. But I had no idea who Bob Reeves was or the shop or anything. And
so that's one of the great things about being alive long enough to see people succeed.
Yeah.
I was talking about Kevin Bryan, who played lead with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. He died in his 40s. He had he had pancreatic cancer. So, and I was thinking about some of the other trumpet players that died so young,
Yeah.
Who was the great lead player? I can't think of. Johnny...
Madrid? Johnny Madrid, yeah.
Right. I worked with him a little bit, and that was insanely good.
Well, and we were just talking about Joe Davis.
Davis.
He wasn't that old when he passed, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And that reminds me, I did a pulmonary study on wind playing. It published in a brass bulletin, a pulmonary approach to a study on brass players. And Bud Brisbois was one of the subjects, and he went much too early too. So... It's a blessing to have crossed paths with these people. They may not have been here a long time. Like what you just did, that incredible interview you did with Roy Wiegand. Oh my God!
Yeah. Yeah.
Who would have known? Thank God, that you had the foresight, the insight to do that. I mean, if there's any question at all about whether your place on this earth is relevant, then you can look at things like that and say, yeah, okay, this is good work.
Well, kind of like how we started. Don't take a day for granted.
Yes.
That's it. I'd like to talk a little bit more about your career in LA, because you did a lot of stuff. You played with the opera, you did the chamber orchestra.
Right.
After your 6 months or so of one gig
right.
and wondering what's going to happen, like when did things start picking up for you, and how did you start connecting those dots of a career?
Well, one of the things that I did, you don't turn anything down, first of all. I'm sure most people will agree with that. when you're starting out, you turn nothing down. So I would do Latin gigs. I bet there's not a great player in the studios that hasn't done their fair share of Latin gigs. So I would do those. I would dress up like an elf and sit right on a train around the mall playing Christmas carols with your dad, I bet.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And this has to go to your dad. Talk about one of the important figures in the brass history of Los Angeles. I'm so glad you did that interview with your father. That was very meaningful as well. So I did those things, and then I was playing in a very good brass quintet, and the other trumpet player, Mike Ortega, was playing extra with the LA Phil on occasion. And so he got a call when we had a rehearsal saying if he wanted to play, and he said, by any chance you need another guy? And he says, yeah, we could use somebody. So I was recommended and got a call to play with the LA Phil. I think climbing up one of those towers and playing who knows what, you know. So that helped a lot. Also, I think that the fact that I was well-rounded as a performer, I mean, I could step in and play in a big band. I would not call myself a jazz musician because I have too much respect for the art of jazz, but I could weave my way through some changes.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I know other people have said this, you know, even when I was in my first gig in the San Antonio Symphony, I showed up at the first rehearsal. It was a Pops concert. They needed somebody to play the blues, you know, so I was happy to do that, you know. So I think that also made a difference. And as far as, so then I got to play with the Phil. I took lessons with Tom Stevens. And that's another story where I think you should, you know, that there were those of us that studied with Tom. He didn't want to take me on as a student. He says, you don't need any help, you know. And I said, no, I was having trouble with my chops and the thing. So he says, come on over. So I went over to his house and I played, and we did the Charlier number 1. And one of your recent guests talked about this teacher that had him do the first two or four measures over and over and over again. Well, Tom was like that. And I'd play 2 or 3 measures, and he'd say, that really sounds like, you know. And so, you know, and this went on for a while. And then I went back I was a glutton for punishment. I go back, I think I'm learning something. And after a while, I saw Mario Guarneri was in the section, and he says, I hear you're studying with Tom. And I go, yeah. And he says, he really likes your playing. And I'm going, whoa, yes. Thank you. You know, but that's what, you know, and just those few lessons with Tom, and this is what this other person said. He said, Tom showed me what he has to put himself through in order to be that great a player. I mean, that's the kind of standards you need in order to be, if you want my job, you're going to have to be and I never did set my standards that high.
Yeah.
I couldn't play as well as he did. I don't think I had the dedication that he had. So it was never going to happen. But at least I realized, okay, wow, there's a whole nother level
kind of like
there.
a window into what players like Tom do
Right.
when they record new works or play in the
Right.
symphony at that level. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating.
So then I started to work a little bit more with the Phil, and I got to be first or second call extra with the Phil. And then after a while, the younger players came up, and I was not playing as well as I might have liked, and they were playing a lot better than I was, and which is the way it should be, right? I remember when I did some studio work, which I was not big at. I was not a great studio player, but I worked with Yuan Racy, this great fellow, and Yuan would say, "Oh, Bill, this is great. You see all these young people playing? This is great. You're playing with us today. That's the best thing, you know, because I'm getting old, you know." And so you can go out bitter, or you can go out thinking, yeah, this is fun, you know.
Yeah.
So Yuan taught me a big lesson, is just as far as how to approach that aspect of one's career, you know, when it's time. I remember when I was the youngest player in the section, and then I realized, I looked around, and I was the oldest player. And so I think, well, okay, you know, get out while the going's good.
Yeah.
Yuan was amazing.
Yeah.
There's a great interview that I think it was Chuck Finley, Malcolm McNabb, and myself did with Yuan Racy. I don't know if any of it's up there. Malcolm has a great store of videos. He's got hundreds of videos. Someday it'll get out there. But Yuan was, as you pointed out, an incredibly unique individual.
Someone else I want to talk about that I know you were close with is Manny Klein.
Yes, Manny.
Can you talk about how you first met him and kind of the relationship you had with him?
Thanks for asking. Manny Klein came to L.A., I think in 1937 from New York, where he was one of the top calls. It was Manny Klein and would be actually, Benny Goodman was playing a lot of saxophone at the time. Manny kept saying, you should be playing clarinet, and Tommy Dorsey, Jimmy Dorsey. And they would do the radio shows. And in 1937, Manny came out to L.A., and couldn't work in the studios right away. They put a ban on people working in the studios right away when he came out because they were afraid he's going to take over the business. And so he went to Hawaii quite often, enjoyed that. When he was 16, studying with Schlossberg got a call of somebody to play first trumpet in the Detroit Symphony. And Manny was 16. He says, I got a guy for you. He'd be great. But Manny was already thinking, I don't want to play classical music all my life. So he turned it down, and by the time he was 18, he was doing shows and doing quite nicely. And it was even, I forgot who the conductor was with the Pittsburgh Symphony, but he invited Manny to come play. So he had these opportunities, but he really always wanted to be a studio player. And so he came out here, and the way I was introduced to him was my father, being a physician, one of his patients was one of the big shots over at Warner Brothers Music. And so he said, Bill, you're a trumpet player. Would you like to meet Manny Klein? I says, sure. I had no idea who Manny Klein was.
Yeah.
So I go to Manny's house, and just a very gracious person. He had just had his stroke. So he wasn't playing professionally anymore, but he could still play. But everything he played, he read up a step. That's just the way his mind was working at that time.
Wow, interesting.
It was very interesting. So we played a trio. I might have been, he had guys coming on, Johnny Audito, Pat Williams, all these luminaries would come and play trios. And we played, and I played. And then we played some jazz or something, a couple of tunes I know. And he was thrilled. He said, this guy is, wow, And so... I think the way it worked was Manny's wife was a big contractor at the time. And so she hooked me up with some gigs. But it turned out I'm not a studio guy. That's not my forte. And so I didn't do a lot of studio work. I did some. But in order to be a studio player, you have to be a really strong first trumpet player. And even though I played first at Michigan, I played first at SC, and I was a good player, I didn't have the chops, I don't think, to really be a studio player. And I say this with all humility and grateful that I realized that, not trying to hit my head against the wall doing something that I wasn't good at. So... And the other thing about that aspect is that these people who are great studio players, like Malcolm, and you can go down the list of the great players, is I soon realized that I really enjoyed being around these people, but I couldn't expect them to give me work just because we were friends. And so I learned right away that I can enjoy their company and play together, but it doesn't mean that just because we're friends, you're going to recommend me for work. And I think that's held me in good stead. That plus my goal of being a great second trumpet player.
Which I mean, I have a story because I remember when I was studying with you and you called me for it was just a church gig or something. And, I always tried to get there early, and I got there early and you were already there and you were already sitting in the second chair. And I was like, well, Bill, but no, you're my teacher. He's like, no, I mean, it pays the same and I want to play second. Go ahead, play first, John.
Good for me, and good for you.
And I learned that. So now I'm earlier so that I get to the third or fourth
The first
chair.
time that happened, I'd been playing first trumpet a lot, and I came back from San Antonio and I played in this concert band, and Roy was there. And I'm sitting on the first part, getting ready to warm up, and I'm looking at Roy, and I'm thinking, Roy, why don't you play first? And he says, what? And he says, yeah, you should play first. And he played first, and that's the way we kept it. I've worked with Roy for many years.
Yeah,
he was the first
colleagues for years.
For years.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't have been happier with that arrangement. And I think I got to be known as somebody who was a dependable second player that wasn't going to try to take your gig away from you.
Yeah.
So, and Manny Klein even said that too. He says, when you go to a gig, sit on the fourth chair. And if they want you to play first, they'll ask you to play first. But...
Did you talk any trumpet with Manny? About his approach or his teachers or anything? Or
He only had one teacher, and that was Schlossberg. I said, what'd you learn from Schlossberg? well, about breathing. I said, like, what about breathing? And he said, well, Schlossberg had an approach. He said, if you don't breathe, you'll die, you know? And I thought, well, that's getting right down to the basics, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, I tried to work with Bob Caron,
Mm-hmm.
who is a fine trumpet player, and he studied with Jacobs. And so I got some breathing tips from him. And then if I wanted to learn about the Caruso method, I went to Harry Kim. And Harry Kim helped me out as far as, figuring out what the relationship to Caruso could be to my playing, my knowledge. So Manny was a natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of those names that, unfortunately he passed away before the internet and
Right.
social media. And so, I mean, trumpet players know about him, but
Right.
the next generations, one of those, he was a mainstay out here for years.
Yeah, he was a top
decades.
dog.
Yeah. So, you've brought up all these different influences you've had and where you've picked ideas. What inspired you to start your own book, doing the Bing book? And
Good question. Thanks. Put in a plug for my Bing book. Well, I did it many years ago when I had a lot of free time, apparently. And I looked at the Arbin book and I thought, the Arbin book has been around for a long time and some things are different. And it might be fun to have a book that kind of encompassed a lot of the new techniques, thinking about how to play. And so every day, for must be at least a year, I would write exercises. I'd play something on the trumpet. And so I decided to set it up into 15 lessons. So rather than the Arbin book bouncing around and whatnot, you could do these 15 lessons. And so I finished it, and I sent to Carl Fisher, and they said they'd love to do it. It'd be a couple of years. And I said, I don't want to wait a couple of years. So I decided to self-publish. That was when Finale just came out. And so I decided, okay, and some people helped me with that. The book came out, and it did well, but it wasn't worth doing a second printing. But now it is available on QPress. So if you go to qpress.ca and ask for the Bing book, it's now back online and available there. But the best thing about the Bing book is that it led to Rob McGregor's publishing company.
really?
Because Rob had asked me when he saw my book, gosh, I've got a lot of things I want you to publish. And at that point, I realized I wasn't a publisher. I'm not a marketer. And so Rob took it upon himself to do his work and publish it under his own company name. But I think the ripple effect is really what's been nice about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and putting all those ideas and incorporate some of the stamp bending, but the
Right.
stuff you do with the multiple tonguing.
Right.
Yeah,
I still think it's the best book out there for multiple tonguing.
I agree. Like what
In my own modest.
you're old, but
Yeah.
like you were saying, some of the things that Arbin's misses, like just the simple idea, multiple tonguing, where you're changing notes.
Right.
Which if you're going dugga dugga dum dugga dugga dum dugga dugga dum, that's
Right,
one thing.
right.
But then you go dugga dugga dum.
Yeah, well, like l'histoire, there's an exercise
Yeah.
on the back of my book. I've been very fortunate. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, I've said also the follow up. So you did the fundamentals book.
I did the fundamentals book.
Yeah. So what does the fundamentals?
The fundamentals book is a little thin book that I came out with that talks about long tones, and it has exercises in there. I decided to write a bunch of exercises that were Caruso in theory, but it's a melodic approach to Caruso. So you go by half steps, and so there's only a few original things in each one of those books. And it's really hard to come up with original ideas. Most of it is based on other people's ideas, but I did come up with something where I felt it could be helpful if you did a half buzz and a half play approach, so that you're not, the mouthpiece isn't full on, but it's off. So you get a half buzz and you use less pressure that way, so you can practice using less pressure. But now Javier's come up with his lead pipe routine, which kind of does the same thing in better ways.
Have you been doing that at all? Trying that
I
out?
did. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
I give it with my students too.
Yeah, and he's got a great YouTube video on that, which also leads me into.
This.
You're on the forefront of you self-published
Well,
before
you're paying
Amazon,
Right,
But
right.
you had a YouTube channel 10, 12
Dang,
years
you've
ago.
done your homework, man. Yeah, I put that up years ago. Before, I think I have over 1,000 followers and like 300,000 hits.
Yeah.
And I think the reason it's popular is because it was one of the very first to do that, and it was also, if you want people to pay attention, you have to produce content. What you've done with your podcast, for example, there's a huge amount of content now. So I think that's what was helpful for me, just to be able to spend a few minutes every day. I think there's 100 videos up there now.
Yeah, covering all range of things.
Yeah.
And
I haven't done anything for years, though, because so many people are doing it now.
Yeah. But I think you still have something to say.
Maybe so. I hope so. I hope so.
And I mean, last couple of questions. I can't believe how we could talk all day.
Wait. There's more.
Yeah, there's more.
Wait, there's more.
I mean, we've covered your teaching. I do want to bring up, because other than trumpet playing and writing method books and freelancing, you were also the director of bands.
Oh, good for you. You know how to ask the right questions. Damn.
Well, I should have. My lead-in was going to say you had the smartest big band in the world. Yeah. But now we know why, because it was all rocket scientists.
They are rocket scientists. For example, one of the trumpet players is now the chief scientist at JPL and was the person responsible for making sure that the different kinds of rovers landed on the surface safely. Another one was deep space. The chair was there's a deep space organization of which he was the head of the Deep Space Network. And all kinds of students that have done things, medically and scientifically and whatnot. So this is an important thing, because I was all set to be the first trumpet player in the Philadelphia Orchestra. That was my goal, which is good to have good goals when you're young. But it became clear, it wasn't clear. When I was at SC, I got a call to interview at Caltech, paid $25 one night a week to be a brass coach. And I thought, well, sure, $25. This is 1970, right? So I went out and did that, and it turned out the band director left, and so they split it into two groups, jazz band and concert band, and I took over the jazz band. No, concert band first, and then the jazz band. Anyway, after I just finished 50 years, I'm retired from Caltech now, but my career was headed towards playing, and then all of a sudden I ended up doing this at Caltech. I was a band director. And so as soon as you become a band director, you're afraid people might think less of you as a trumpet player. And I think there is some truth to that. But I was fortunate in that while I was a band director, I was also playing with the LA Chamber Orchestra, and I was playing with the LA Opera Orchestra doing this other work. And so it was very compatible. I loved being a band director. So it was something that I feel very fortunate about. And it also meant I had a lot of irons in the fire. Like when I was playing with the LA Opera Orchestra for 10 years, and they had a new contractor come in. And the new contractor decided he was going to get rid of a lot of people because he wanted to get his own people in there. Well, guess what? All three trumpet players, bye-bye, after 10 years,
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting. How am I going to make it a living,
Yeah.
But then I remembered I'm teaching at CSUN. I'm playing with the LA Orchestra, Chamber Orchestra. I've got all these other kinds of freelance situations. I was playing a lot with Pacific Symphony. So as much as possible, I was very fortunate to have all this other things going on. So when the opera orchestra fell through, and they got a great new section, it wasn't like they dumped us for some hags. They got there's no shortage of great players, and so we weren't. I don't think we were really missed, except for ourselves. Yeah. So I was just lucky. So that's another bit of advice: is do what you can to, especially if you're a player, to spread yourself out and do as much as you can.
Well, so I mean, what I'm hearing you saying is but having that band director gave you kind of a safety net, so to speak.
Great safety net.
Yeah, which allowed you to then continher your freelance career.
Exactly.
And have somewhat of a comfortable life.
You are intuitive. You should become a lawyer.
That'll be another podcast. Well, that'll be the other side of the bell.
Yeah.
I've made that joke before, but not everyone's heard every episode.
What is it?
The other side of the bell.
The other side of the bell.
But so you said you were there 50 years. And what was it like teaching? I mean, they didn't have music majors, right? So this was
no music majors.
So, but these were, rocket scientists that loved playing music. It seems like though. So it must have been a joy to give them that outlet.
Yes,
they're in their head all the time, right?
Right. It was really wonderful for them because we often had evaluations, and they said it keeps me from going crazy. Being here 2 or 3 hours every week is what I need in order to be good in the lab. In fact, one of my friends was a Nobel Prize winner. His name was Ed Lewis, and he played the flute every day. And I say, Ed, why do you play the flute every day? And he says, well, I can be emotional on the instrument in ways that I can't be in the lab. And it was just really really, I thought, a great answer. So I think that's a lot of what being at Caltech has done for me and for the students.
So I have a couple quick questions
Yes.
that may fall flat, and in which case we'll edit them out. And if they may be nice little gems.
No, okay.
First thing is on Jimmy Stamp, because I know the Jimmy Stamp book in its published iteration has not caused controversy, but there's a lot of different ways you can interpret what's in there, and maybe not necessarily what Jimmy had actually taught. With your time with Jimmy and also what you've taught of his concepts, what do you think is how would you explain the concepts that are in that book if you were to teach it yourself?
Well, the Jimmy Stamp book is like an onion. It can be examined on the outside and it looks like an onion, smells like an onion, and tastes like an onion. And then you can peel it away and you get a little bit deeper into it. And it's still the same person. It's still Jimmy Stamp. But what you find out by doing them a lot is that you gain a deeper understanding of your playing. Now, how does that work? You can take number 6, for example. Ba-da-da-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-da-da-da. Easy. And almost anybody can play that. But then Jimmy adds the hole on the first time through on those notes to give you a sense of where is the sound. And then he gives you that little riser there to think you want to hold the pitch down as you go up. So you can look at that deeper level than just playing da-da-da-da-dee-da. Okay, now I'm going to hold that top note and listen for the sound. If the sound isn't right, then maybe I have to take the note just below the top note and see where that is. And if that's in tune, then I have a chance of getting the last note in tune, the upper note in tune. And so, that and also all of those exercises go from low to high, which enables you to practice that concept, because most of the trouble comes going from low to high. There's some issues going high to low, but more importantly, it's the slurs, for example. You go from that to lesson 3, where you have ba-da-da-da-dee-da-dum, and that's just real easy. And you keep taking that down. And one of the things that you really, I think, in my opinion, is important is when you go to the pedal tones. How do you play the pedal tones? And for many years, I made an adjustment. I put the tip of the bell up, and I'd play with the tip of the bell up, and I get this fantastic sound, but I couldn't get into the upper register. So finally, it dawned upon me that when I would be playing these exercises, and when I went to the pedal register, I really had to keep the horn in the same place and figure out how to play those notes, pedal tone notes, with the embouchure in the same place. And so I would move the mouthpiece away from the lips, use less pressure, and then I'd get a good sound, and I'd be able to go into the upper register. And so, that's another way of layering his concepts. And those are just 2 examples, I think, of the way that you can look at the Jimmy Stamp book.
Absolutely wonderful. Another thing that I remember from my lessons with you, and that unfortunately for my pocketbook and my vast CD collection, was you were always listening. Every time, every lesson, you say, "Hey, John, listen to this orchestra. Hey, John, listen to this Tim Higgins trumpet solo." Who do you listen to now? Like who's inspiring
what's really inspiring me now? I've been listening to this Chilean group, and their hit tune is "Zombie," and it's a lot like Snarky Puppy. I wish I could remember the name of the group. Maybe we can add that in show notes or something like that. If I go to my YouTube channel, maybe it'll come up. Here is Newen Afrobeat, Newen Afrobeat.
That's the name of the tune?
It's Zombie is the name of the tune. That's the name of the group. But I mean, the energy, like a couple of days I was going to practice and I had no energy to practice. I put this on. Next thing you know, I'm dancing. I'm having a great time. There's energy there. And I play along with it. I encourage all my students to take these kinds of pieces of music, whether it's classical or jazz, and play along with it. Learn your modes, learn your scales that way. It's the best way to do it. So, I'm constantly discovering new music thanks to my students and my just poking around the internet. Yeah. I'm a real junkie when it comes to trumpet. I listen to just so many different trumpet podcasts, and I learn so much. So.
Do you have a desert island record? The cliched, if you were stuck on a desert island and you had
be a close between something with Clifford Brown or else the Bach B minor Mass. Be finding a nice Clifford album and or I played the B minor mass on tour with the LA Chamber Orchestra and got to really love that.
Well, we'll allow one jazz, one classical. So.
Right.
So we're allowed.
That's
good.
good.
We'll get that in.
That's good.
And then last but not least, and I always forget this, the equipment. What mouthpiece and horns that you've used for your career.
Right. I've been a Bach guy as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
And when Bob was still around, I would come here periodically and he would help me find a mouthpiece. And I still have some of those.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to bounce around too much. I found that the mouthpiece that really worked well for me when I was playing was a Bach. It's a Bach 1B1X with a 22 throat and a 76 backbore. And so, I didn't really have to play high all that often. So when I did go high, there would be, that was when I throw in a Reeves or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What was it, 2 or something?
42S or something or
like that.
42M.
Right, yeah right. So that was all. Brad McGregor used to say, he says, security is knowing there's another mouthpiece in your case that's smaller than the one you're playing on. So I take that to heart. Yeah.
I absolutely love it. Oh, man.
Hey, I got some things here.
Okay.
You're not getting rid of me
Okay,
yet.
go for it.
Okay, 10 things. This is on my website, williambing.com. 10 things that I learned from other teachers in no particular order. Number 1, one should have reverence for every note. This is a quote from Johan Racy, said in a lesson with Dusty McKinney. Number 2, lip bends to help center the sound. Number 3, the shape of the muscles formed under the lips should be an inverted C. This led me to develop the notion that we should think about having 3 points of strength, one on each corner of the lip, and a third which is located at the bottom of the chin. Imagine a string is attached to the bottom of the chin. On the bottom of the string is a weight, which is heavier the higher you play, and this will help keep your shape. Organize your daily lesson routine and those for your students, and adapt any exercise to meet your needs from Claude Gordon. Jimmy Stamp, as you go up, stay down, and as you go down, stay up. Next, from Tom Stevens, High Standards. From Bob Karen, Proper Breathing Techniques. From Rob McGregor, How to Phrase. From Frank Katarabic, You Can't Be a First Trumpet Player and Be Shy. Manny Klein, Have Fun with Life and with Music. Timothy Dockschutzer, who I took a lesson with, said, control the instrument and not let the instrument control you. For example, learn to play with and without vibrato. And Caruso studies, one lesson with Harry Kim introduced me to the beauty and simplicity of these studies for help with the upper register. That's it.
10 things. And that just started a new speed round of the podcast, a new segment. So we need some intro music.
Okay.
And then every guest from here on out, we're going to do the other side of the bell speed round. Yeah. All of your advice that you've learned.
Well, I got to make it. I could go in any minute now, So I gotta put it all in, because
Oh my gosh, Bill.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned WilliamBing.com. You
Yes,
have a wonderful website, and then we'll have the link to your YouTube channels because, like you said, you have like 100 or more videos of little. I mean, some of them are short, some of them are longer interviews that are great.
Right.
So before we go, because I usually do a little outro that thanks the guest and try to, since you're here, I want to thank you in person for all. For all you've done, just for me personally, literally and figuratively, I wouldn't be here today because, I mean, the things I learned from you about life and trumpet, but also, like you had mentioned, the phone call that I got to work here, all came thanks to you.
Thank you for being so appreciative. That's a nice thing.
And your advice that don't quit your day job to start the interview off, I feel is indirectly.
Okay. Let's see. I got to come up with something a little better than that. So don't quit your day job.
Your best advice, Bill. What are you going to leave us with?
What am I going to leave you with?
Yeah.
I guess the important thing is that. I think you said it. You said it earlier. You said grateful. Be grateful. I think be grateful for the moments that we have together, and for the wonderful music that we're able to enjoy in a special way that other people may not have that experience. And thank those people that have helped you in the past, as you were so grateful to do, and keep that connection going.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Bill,
is that it?
What an honor.
Woo! Wait, there's more.
All right, now you can do your stand-up routine. We'll just leave it rolling.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Well, there's a reason I normally record these outros after the fact, because, for someone who does a podcast, I'm really not good with words. and thinking on my feet. But with Bill as my first and last trumpet teacher, I don't know, last in terms of formal education, I felt it was really important for me to at least tell Bill how I felt and how thankful I am for what he's done for me, not just as a player, as a person, but also as just an inspiration. I learned so much from him directly through his lessons and indirectly. Like I said, as I was a young, dumb middle school and high school kid taking lessons from Bill, and had no idea the caliber of player he was or teacher at the time. I mean, I had ideas. I wasn't that dumb, but I didn't know he had studied with Tom Stevens and Gattal. I didn't even know who those people were at the time. And the fact that I had access to that kind of information and that what he was passing down to me, nonetheless, it made a huge impact on me. I remember the time he came into a lesson and said, "Oh, well, I just had a lesson with Bobby Shue," or Timothy Dockschitzer was in town and I got a lesson with him. And it just, twisted my little brain to think, well, he's, Bill's a professional player and a teacher and a college professor. And why is he going and taking trumpet lessons? So it, that opened up that, kind of lifelong learning thing at me, thankfully at a young age. And also thankfully because it took me so long to figure things out. I had to be a lifelong student. Anyway, and what he kind of talked about, he's the reason I'm here. He recommended me to the shop when I was doing computer stuff while I was going to Cal State Northridge as a trumpet major to pay bills and things. And, I love computer stuff, but I also didn't want to do that as a career. And lo and behold, not only did I end up working here, but now I co-own the place and couldn't think of any other path in my life. And I owe that all to Bill. And then there's a joke in there somewhere too, because he brought up some other students that went and studied with Bobby Shue, and they went on to be famous professional trumpet players. So maybe he saw something in me that I'd be better in business than getting a lesson with Bobby Shue. But lest I digress, again, Bill has had such an impact on me and so many others that I'm, of his students. And I think you can get a piece of the reasons why just talking to him. So much brilliance there, not just in, his intellect, but also the way he describes things and explains things. I highly recommend the Bing book, the Fundamentals book. All of that stuff is great. I'm not just, blowing smoke with that. I've used those, and I've used those with my private students when I used to teach, and they're excellent, excellent books. So anyway, enough about Bill. Thank you again, Bill, for so much for what you've done for me, but also what you've shared with our listeners here on the podcast. All right, what do we have coming up next? I interviewed Mike Price, the jazz trumpeter, who's out here in LA now, but he was in Japan for a while. He was famous for playing with Stan Kenton and Buddy Rich. He was also the original member of the Toshiko Akiyoshi and Lou Tabakin Big Band here in LA. And he's got a lot of great recordings and experience, obviously, that we're going to talk about. So stay tuned for Mike Price. We have a lot of other great podcasts in the mix here. We're doing a Chase tribute with Alan Ware. Alan was a previous guest, original member of the Chase Band, and we've been in contact with some of the other original members. So we're putting that together. As I teased early on, Chris Bodie with his new album, we'll have him back on here in the near future, plus a lot of other great guests, as you can expect with The Other Side of the Bell. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for reaching out. I've heard from a number of you this last month. My good friend Tom in Croatia sent me a wonderful message, said he listened to the interview with my dad, my Father's Day interview with Dad, and said it was such a great interview, so much wisdom that my dad had to share, and also our just father-son interactions. He said were great to listen to. So Tom, thank you for reaching out. It meant a lot to me, as does everyone else who reached out to me. So if you want to email me suggestions, constructive criticisms, anything you want, John, JOHN at BobReeves.com. And that's all for this episode. Until next time, let's go out and make some music.